I want to start off introducing our speakers tonight. My name's Heidi Nauman. I'm the practice manager for the Brain Health Clinic. And I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dr. Hlee, who is a chiropractor who specializes in sports performance, rehabilitation, prenatal, and pediatric care. She combines diversified adjustments, soft tissue therapy, and techniques like Activator and Thompson to help patients of all ages achieve lasting relief and better health. Outside the clinic, she enjoys life with her two dogs, Hades and Hera, exploring new restaurants, basketball, baking, drawing, chess, and cheering on the Minnesota Lynx. And we'll also hear tonight from Fran Bieganek and Guy Odishaw, the two co-founders of the Bhakti Brain Health Clinic. So each of them will have 30 minutes to speak. We'll take turns, and then we'll save time at the end for some questions and answers too. So we really appreciate you all being here, and we'll give a big welcome to Dr. Hlee.
Hi everyone, welcome for tonight. I hope you've had a good day so far. I myself had a busy day, so I'm excited to be here, educate people, and just learn, right? It's really important to just educate your mind and just learn as you go. So I'm really excited to talk about my topic today, concussion, and how we can help in the chiropractic world. So I work at Health Source here in Edina off of France, is my clinic location. So if you're looking for a chiropractor, know anybody that's looking for a chiropractor, just come on out and be happy to do an exam and get to know you more, okay? So the first thing here is just an agenda about what we're going to do today. Maybe. Yep. Perfect. That's on the screen. So I'm just going to talk about, it's important to know what a concussion is. There's lots of definitions out there. I'm going to give you my definition of what a concussion is. We'll talk about the signs and symptoms. I'm talking about the treatment plan, what we do in clinic to help patients with concussions. And then really important with anybody in a concussion is to learn how to return back to your daily activity and lifestyle. And then talk about a case study about a patient of mine that I dealt with concussion last year. So anybody want to give a shot about what a concussion is? If you don't want to answer, that's okay. I'd be happy to provide my answer as well. Anybody want to shoot anything out there? That's okay. I got you guys. So here we go. A concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury that alters your brain function when the head or body experiences a sudden impact or jolt. So whether it's a car accident, so like Heidi said, I work a lot with sports athletes. That's a big area that you hear about concussions. So whether it's playing football, soccer, volleyball, really anything, boxing, once again, it's just that sudden impact to the brain or head or body causing that moment of sudden impact. So, like I said, the causes of a concussion is the brain and the head quickly moving back and forth in that motion. Also, the brain will bounce within that skull, causing that sudden movement, and then the chemical changes in the brain and sometimes stretching and damaging to the brain cells. So, signs and symptoms. I'm going to break into three categories here. The first one, the common signs and symptoms that you'll find in patients. And then I'll talk about the big five and then the red flags when you need to seek additional care. So there's a long list of symptoms here. And so when patients have that immediate impact of an injury, the first thing people tend to tell you what they experience is a headache, dizziness, balance problems. People can be feeling nauseous. Light is a big thing for many people, and noise. On top of that, confusion, memory problems, fatigue, blurred vision, ringing in the ears, and then mood changes. So once again, just a long list. And then for me to remember these things, especially when I'm on the field with these athletes, big things I look for are the big five. So the big five, or the 5 S's, however you want to remember it. So I remember them as slump. The moment that patient on the field gets hit, let's say the football athlete gets hit, they fall on the ground, slump, right, is the big one. They are feeling, when they get hit, they have this lack of movement, right? They're just unconscious, laying motionless, slump. The next thing I notice is sway. Once they're out of that slump, they either kind of try to stand up and get up. They're going to sway, be a little bit wobbly. The next thing I notice right after that is a slow motion where they start to get up, walking very slowly, the delayed movements, just not all there. The next thing is stunned. They're confused, unusual behavior. Once again, they're just trying to understand exactly what's happening in that moment. And the last big 5 is the slur. This is where they're trying to respond to you, but it's not in a good communication style. So they have slurred speech, or they're just responding poorly to you. Some red flags when this happens in the moment of a concussion is that you'll see that patient having a seizure, doubled vision, loss of consciousness, trouble speaking, weakness, whether it's in their arm or leg, agitated or combative. That's when you need to seek emergency care. That's when the athletic trainer needs to know, I need to put a C-collar on my patient and get them, to the ENT or EMT, and make sure they get right to the ER so they can get a better examination of what's happening. Because a traumatic brain injury is a big thing and shouldn't be taken lightly. So the treatment. So outside of spinal manipulation, as a chiropractor, I prescribe additional care. As I state on this page here, rest is important, nutrition, and rehab. So I'll kind of break that down and see how those all play out as what I do for my patients. So the first one here is rest. Both physically and mentally is a big part. Rest is super important in the first 24 to 48 hours once that happens, because your brain needs that healing and recovering process. So what I mean by physically is trying to avoid any type of strenuous activities, whether it's weightlifting, any type of quick movements, running. And then for mentally, what I mean by that is screen time, limiting that tremendously. I know we live in a world where we love to sit on our laptops, tablets, phones, so make sure we limit that as much as we can. And then also books, right? I know books are not like a limit or a screen, so we want to be able to just rest our mind on top of that. So sleep is super important. I know some studies have said like sleep, don't do that, right? We're concerned of what if they don't wake up? No, we need that rest, especially in those first two days. Nutrition. When I have patients with concussions, I really talk about nutrition. It plays a big part in how they recover. So the big one we talk about is adding in omega-3 sources. So it could be fish. I can talk more about that on the next page as well, but like fish is a big source. I also add in supplementation of omega-3s. The next thing I tell my patients is to eat high protein. And so lean protein is a big thing here as well. A lot of the times when patients are experiencing these symptoms, they don't want to eat. So it's our job to make sure that we're still eating those foods. Next thing is to increase your fruits and vegetables. So decrease inflammatory foods that are high in processed refined foods. So like beverages and high in added sugar. Last thing, really important for the nutrition, don't skip meals. Like I said before, it's super important to eat even if you're feeling nauseous. So we make sure that we're eating smaller frequent meals, if anything, especially with athletes that I treat, right? They're losing that muscle mass, so it's our job to make sure we're still eating to increase that muscle. Like I said, omega-3s is a big thing here. So omega-3, because it's anti-inflammatory, it helps a lot with the brain health and brain memory and recovery. And so, like I said, some examples for omega-3s through food is like flax seeds, walnuts, spinach, salmon, cod liver oil, shrimp. And in the office, I really love talking about omega-3 supplementation. So what they recommend is roughly about 1 to 3 grams per day. So once you have an injury, I'm going to increase that intake to about 9 grams a day. It's just really going to help overall with that omega-3 intake. And then the last thing I do with my patients, so outside of what I've talked about already with rest and adjustments and nutrition, is the rehab and other modalities we do in office and at home. So soft tissue work is really important. So when patients have concussions, their neck and upper body are super tense and stiff because they're in that protective state. So my job is I will go ahead and adjust their neck. It might sound weird, right? Hey, I just went through a concussion, but now I'm going to go have you lay on the table and I'm going to adjust you. So the first week I do gentle approaches with the activator, and I'm going to adjust your C1. Typically, I will do my thorough examination, but typically what happens is I adjust the C1. That helps a lot with that nervous system. And then I'll make my way down based on the palpation examination. And then when I'm doing the soft tissue work, I'm going to work a lot with the suboccipital muscles, which sit at the base of your skull here, and then work my way down. So a lot of it's going to be the scalenes, the SCM, the trapezius muscles. Once again, those muscles are just super aggravated because you went through something traumatic. I do a lot with like lotion, just and trigger point therapy to the patient's tolerance. The next thing I'm going to do is have them do an interferential current therapy or TENS unit, whatever is easier for the patient. If they have that at home, great. But in offices, I do the IFC. About 10 minutes of that, I'm just going to place it on their upper back and neck just to help reduce inflammation and increase blood flow to the area. Same thing with the heat. We'll put the heat pack right over that stim pad machine where the pads are. And so once again, that just really helps reduce inflammation in that area for those patients. Like I said, that would be the first week of treatment. So adjustment, soft tissue, and IFC and heat. The second week of my patient care, I'm going to start adding the rehab portion, which is the neck stretches and the cervical vestibular rehab exercises, which I'll talk a little bit more here. So the neck exercises, we're going to focus a lot on the deep neck flexors. So in the image you see here on your right hand side, the first one is a chin tuck. So it's super simple. What you're going to do is create a double chin and then lift if you're laying down. But if you're just standing or sitting the way I am, double chin and lift. Just really focusing on those back muscles here. Next one I teach my patients is shoulder shrugs. So you're just sitting here and really think about just lifting your shoulders up and relaxing. Lift and relaxing. The next thing we're going to do is then transition them into cervical vestibular exercises. So the first one we do, depending on how the patient is progressing, we're going to start with them just a single leg balance. So it's really important when we're having these treatments is to talk about their symptoms, how they're progressing, and just monitor all of that. So when we do the single leg balance, if balance is a big problem, make sure they're close to either a wall or give them like a little stick to provide stability. But it's important to have them just kind of stand single leg, lift your leg up. Our goal eventually for that patient is to try to do 20 seconds with your eyes open. Once they complete that, they're going to go to the next level of eyes closed. So for me to do this, I should be okay and be able to do this because I don't have an injury. But as you can see, I'm kind of shaking, right? That just means I don't really have that strong muscles in my legs to support my body. Same thing, we're going to do it on the other side. Typically speaking, when someone goes through an injury, one side is going to be worse than the other. Once they're able to do that, then we'll move on to the tandem stance. What that means is one leg or one foot in front of the other. Same thing with your eyes open. Try to do it for 20 seconds. Once they reach that 20 seconds, then eyes close. Same thing, we're going to switch legs, left foot in front of the right. Once again, reach the goal of 20 seconds. We're also going to do the gaze stability. So how I do for patients is put their thumbs in front of you. So if you guys want to do it with me, that'd be great. So keep your eyes focused on your thumbs. We're just going to nod our head up and down while keeping your eyes there. For many people with concussions, this is going to be hard. They probably feel dizzy. So it's really important to know when they have those symptoms come back up. Once again, our goal is to try to hit for 20 seconds without any symptoms, right? The next one we'll do is now we're saying no. So turn your head while you're keeping your eyes there. No. No. Once again, noting your symptoms is key here to tell us how the patient is progressing over time. So as you can see, there's a few exercises that we do with our patients. They're not super difficult by any means, but when you have a concussion, it is hard to do. So most important step about returning back to activity is just starting slow and increase your time of activity over time. So whether it's school, sports, back to your work day, it's important to do it in a stepwise manner and listen to your bodies and your symptoms. Otherwise, we don't know how you're progressing, right? It's easy for a lot of athletes that I work with and be like, I'm totally fine. I'm going to get back into the game next week. Unfortunately, it's just going to make things worse. So it's our job as the adult and coaches to know where we stand and teach our patients to do better as they continue. So the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be just returning back to the classroom or work or your daily activities. Like I said earlier, start slow. So try 5 to 15 minutes with no increased symptoms. So if you can sit at your desk and look at a screen for 5 minutes, great. And if you can't, and you start to get nauseous or the light or the screen bothers you, then decrease that, right? So just slowly take your time as you go. Once you reach that 30 minutes of no pain or symptoms, then I would say it's safe for you to go back to a full day of work, right? But once again, start slow. Take a half day. Work your way up to a full day. At this point, it's really important, once again, to listen to your symptoms, listen to your body, see where you're at. But once you're able to do a full day with like no symptoms, then I would say just go back to work. You should be okay. Same thing with the sports realm and activities, whether you're a big time runner or anything like that. Always start slow again. So if you're getting back into your sports or activity lifestyle, start slow. Just walk, right? Walk is a daily activity for many people. So just start there. Make sure you don't have any symptoms again. If you do, stop what you're doing. Just go back into a point of time where it feels okay for you to do things. Next, once you're past that stage of walking for 15 minutes or light bike, move on to the next step, which is moderate exercise. So go for a run. See if you can run for 30 minutes with no pain. Great. See if you can weightlift for 30 minutes with no pain. Wonderful. Once again, just continue on. Once you have no symptoms, then it's okay to have the patients go back to the non-contact sports. What that means is they can practice with their teammates. Just don't do the full thing, right? Limit your time frame with the team. Then we'll move on to full contact. Go ahead and go to practice. Do everything. Run the drills with your colleagues and whatnot. Lastly, most important, absolutely no symptoms. Then return to full game. You're ready to go and go back to your normal lifestyle. A case study. So I had Bailey come in last year. She is a 15-year female. She plays basketball. Also really loves school. So a big part of her life is, basketball and school. Bailey was at a game. She went for a rebound, missed, and then when she landed, she had tripped on someone's foot, hit her head on the floor. So the trainer decided it was best for her to get treated. They performed a thorough examination, says, yeah, you can't play today. We're going to put you to the side. I think it's, go home and rest, but I think you should go see a chiropractor sometime this week. So her mom brought her in. So Bailey, at this point, explained everything that just happened. And I said, I know they just did an examination with you, but I also would like to do one myself. So we go through a lengthy questionnaire with her to make sure how severe her concussion is. So with that, I decided for Bailey, for her, a 24-visit plan. So I was seeing Bailey for about 3 months. So the first month, weekly, I saw her about 3 times a week. Like I said before, the first week was pretty slow for her. We just started with gentle adjustments, that heat, and muscle tissue work for her, just to kind of get her back to her comfortable state. Really neat for Bailey. She was able to go back to school full time after 2 weeks of care, which is important to her because she loves her academics. And so that was great for her. As we continued on with her care, by week 3, we were able to then incorporate those rehab exercises. She was doing her neck stretches and also at home. So she really wanted to do more than she could handle. I told her we should probably slow down, but she's like, no, I really want to get back to basketball. Like, that's super important to me. I said, great. We just want to make sure we're still listening to her body, right? It's super important. And so by week 4, she was able to get back into practice and, have fun with her classmates and teammates, but unfortunately it was towards the end of the season. And so she wasn't able to go back to a full game, but that's okay. I told her, you're still super young. You got next year to play and just focus on your recovery. So I thought that was pretty neat. So yeah, in 2 weeks, she was able to return to full time. And then by week 4, she was able to get back to her practicing, which is super important to her. So just connecting the dots here for everyone. So we talked about all sorts of things. What is a concussion? Does anybody want to give it a shot now? Yes. Exactly. Perfect. Thank you. Yes. A mild traumatic brain injury. And then the big 5. Does anyone remember what the big 5 are? Yep. Slump. Sway. Slow. Yes.
Slur.
Yep. And one more. And stunned. Yeah, it was the last one. So good job. Thank you. Yes. And treatment. My most important step here is rest is super key to feeling better as we continue on with your treatment plan. And then I put some exercise at the bottom here. I think we can share this with people. So perfect. So kind of an idea of how to do things. I just showed you the quick 5 that I typically do, but these are more that I also do. Awesome. Any questions? That's okay. Oh,
Please send these links to everybody afterwards.
yes, that'd be great. Yep. I can share them. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about, kind of inside the skull. So Dr. Lee did a fantastic job of talking about kind of everything from the skull out and down, right? So I was thinking in all of the TBI presentations we've done, which we've done numerous over the years, we've never had anybody do such a great job of doing the functional and physical medicine aspect of concussion. There was a lot in there that was, I don't want to say new to me, but I haven't heard all put together in a presentation. And it occurred to me, we should have done this sooner. This was fantastic. It was great to cover the aspect of it that we don't deal with in our clinic and we generally don't talk about. So I think that there's going to be a great synergy there between you taking care of the physical and functional medicine side and us doing what we do, taking care of kind of the neurology. Let's see, let's get my clicker to work. So we always like to show kind of our pedigree. Who did we train under? It gives a sense of, in the world of neurofeedback, where there are hundreds of different kinds of neurofeedback, for mostly other practitioners to know what we do, how we do it, the equipment we work with, the software we work with, the range of things that we can treat and how we would treat it. That information is all kind of embedded in this information. So this is the number one question we get wherever we go is there research? And yes, there's mountains of research for what we do. So on here we have our 3,680,000 studies on electrical stimulation. That's enough. And then if we drill in a little bit more and get into some of the specifics, we can see, again, there are thousands of studies. And then here, if we dig in specifically to today's topics, again, we can see that there's a good body of research. So everything we're going to talk about is going to be evidence-based. It is what we do in the clinic, our treatments, everything is all
of what might be happening.
Okay. Let's try that again. Okay. That's what didn't happen last time. Okay. So we're going to take a listen to a talk about concussion, but he's going to show some interesting information in terms of a form of, it's not exactly imaging, but they're going to translate it into imaging, the data that they're going to get and translate it into imaging to give a sense of concussion that is rarely understood or talked about or put forward. Most of us, even today, if you go to a talk on concussion, they will show the picture, the classic, the head goes forward, and then the brain slams into the front of the head, and the head goes backwards, and then the brain slams in the back of the head. And that's the coup counter coup is still the most talked about incident of concussion. And what he's going to present here is, that's a fine idea, but actually a whole lot more happens in the brain than this idea of the surface of the brain colliding with the skull. And once we understand that, we understand the significance of a concussion and why symptoms can be so disparate and not necessarily what we might think of if we think of just kind of a bruise on the cortex. So we're going to take some time and kind of go through a little bit of a investigation.
So concussion. The video here that you see when you type in to Google, what is a concussion? The CDC comes up, and this video essentially tells the whole story. We use forward, the brain behind, then the brain catches and smashes into the skull. It rebounds the skull, and then proceeds to run into the other side of the skull. And notice it's highlighted in this video from the CDC, which I'll note was funded by the NFL, is that the outer surface of the brain, where it was to have smashed into the skull, looks like it's been damaged or injured. So it's on the outer surface of the brain. And what I'd like to do with this video is to tell you that there are some aspects that are probably right, indicative of what the scientists think happens in concussion, but there's probably more that's wrong with this video. So one thing I do, and I think most experts would, is that the brain does have this dynamics. It does lag behind the skull and then catch up and move back and forth and oscillate. That we think is true. However, the amount of motion you see in the brain in this video is probably not right at all. There's very little room in the cranial vault, only a few millimeters, and it's filled entirely with cerebrospinal fluid, which acts as a protective layer. And so brain as a whole probably moves very little inside the skull. The other problem with this video is that the brain is shown as a kind of rigid whole as it moves around. And that's not true either. Your brain is one of the softest substances in your body, and you can think of it kind of like jello. So as your head is moving back and forth, your brain is twisting and turning and contorting, and the tissue is getting stretched. And so most experts, I think, would agree that concussion is not likely to be something that's happening on this outer surface of the brain, but rather it's something that's much deeper towards the center of the brain. The way that we're up in this problem to try to understand the mechanism of concussion and to figure out if we can prevent it is we are using a device like this. It's a mouth guard.
It's a mouth guard.
There's in it that are essentially the same that are in your cell phone. Accelerometers, gyroscope, and when struck in the head, it can tell you how their head moved at 1,000 samples per second. So this is our, and I want the first concussion that we measured with this device. One of the things that I should point out is the device has this gyroscope in it, and that allows you to measure the rotation of the head. Most experts think that it's the critical factor that might start to tell us what is happening with concussion. So please watch the
Slump.
excessive there, but you get the idea. So when you look at just the film here, pretty much the only thing you can see is he got hit really hard and he was hurt. But when we extract the data out of the mouth guard that he was wearing, we can see much more detail, much richer information. Now this is only limited in such that it can measure the skull motion, but what we really want to know is what's happening inside of the brain. So we collaborated with Spine Cliven's group in Sweden. They've developed a finite element model of the brain. And so the simulation using the data from our mouth guard from the injury I just showed you. And what you see is the brain, this is a cross section right in the front of the brain twisting and contorting as I mentioned. So you can see this doesn't look a lot like the CDC video. Now the colors looking at are how much the brain tissue is being stretched. And so 50%, that means the brain has been stretched to 50% its original length, the tissue in that particular area. And the main thing I want attention to is this red spot. So the red spot is very close to the center of the brain, and relatively speaking, you don't see a lot of colors like that on the exterior surface as the CDC video showed.
So there's a very, very, very shortened version of a much longer video. We goes into more details, but it gives you a sense, again, of how a concussion is really three-dimensional through the brain and is going to be unique with every impact that happens. How much rotation, how much side to side, what axes does that happen? And that's going to, in part, determine how does that concussion kind of spider web through the brain, and then what functions might be impacted by it. So here we're looking at tensor diffusion tracks in the brain. So again, to give a sense of these very fine networks of neurons that, again, that those are getting stretched and pulled. And like a sprain, you have a sprained ankle, can't really walk on it so well. Similarly, you have sprained neurons, very similar. They can't function very well. They need all the rest that Dr. Lee talked about, the nutrients to help recover. One of the main things that comes from a concussion or can come from a concussion is inflammation. So again, just like the sprained ankle, you're going to have an inflammation response as the body's way to bring healing to the area. And so we see a similar thing happen in the brain. There also could potentially be internal bleeding. So we might get blood where we don't want it to be. That can cause an inflammatory effect that is less about a supportive and more about an immune response. So it's not uncommon at all to see in concussion acute inflammation that goes on to become chronic inflammation. And it could be years post-concussion, and that person still has chronic inflammation from that. So this is a way that we see it in EEG when we're looking. So we do a QEEG or neuroimaging. So again, another thing that the why do a QEEG is when he talks about how the brain kind of contorts and stretches. If you look at that brain on MRI, for the most part, unless it was a severe injury, it's going to look completely normal. There's not going to be any indication of injury on an MRI. When we look, we won't see injury, we'll see what we call dysregulation. And so because we can image the brain three-dimensionally, volumetrically, we can we track the function of all of those individual neural tracks that we talked about, we can see the breakdown in function in there. Again, much like what Dr. Hlee is doing when she's looking at the body and say looking at how is balance, she's looking at it out here. We're doing that inside looking at tracks of neurons. So this is a way that likely neural inflammation will show up. There is no definitive test for inflammation in the brain. You can't do it with a blood test, you can't do it with an MRI, you can't do it with a CAT scan or a SPECT scan or a QEEG. But all of those can give you indications that maybe there's neural inflammation. And for us, this is one of our best and brightest indicators that this is likely neural inflammation. So Fran is going to come up and talk with you about some of the specifics of what we do. And then we're going to go into some case studies and get into a little bit more detail. Your clicker is right there.
Okay, so for those of you in the room, we have our volunteer. We're going to do a demonstration of neurofeedback in a little bit, and we have a volunteer here. So if those of you online, you'll get a chance to see our volunteer's brain in a little while. There are, when we look at the brain, when we're looking at TBI or concussion, or clients that come in with concussion history, we're really looking for biomarkers in the brain that might support the the assessment that there is some kind of lingering injury or dysregulation happening in the brain. This shows you some of the main biomarkers. I'm not going to bother going through this list and reading it to you. You'll have it in your PDF when you get your the slides after the show. We'll talk about these as we look at case study and how they might present as we're looking at a QEEG. So the way we treat concussion and TBI in the Brain Health Clinic, we always start with our brain mapping, the quantitative EEG, and that will give us all the information we need to really figure out what type of dysregulation and where that dysregulation is in the brain, so that we have a good idea of how we want to approach treatment, or we call it training, in our clinic. So we use that EEG recording and the analysis to guide us in the training protocol that we're going to use. So the list on the screen here is just the potential ways that we might work with a client to work on regulating the dysregulation we see in the brain. So you can see we do neurofeedback. We do neurostimulation, so that might be transcranial alternate current or direct current stimulation, pulsed magnetic stimulation, random noise stimulation, any of those possibilities. We most often will use audiovisual entrainment. That tends to be more of an at-home treatment that we use as an augment or supplement to the in-clinic training that individuals are doing with us. Photobiomodulation as well. We'll see that as we talk about some of the case studies that we're going to share with you. So infrared light treatment at home. For those of you in the room here, there are devices in the back that you can take a look at in that regard. And then oftentimes we're also talking about utilizing a sleep supplement. Dr. Hlee talked about the significant importance of rest. And oftentimes when people have concussion or TI, they have difficulty sleeping. And one of two things, either they can't fall asleep, they're not resting well, or in some cases we see people who will sleep way more hours during the day than they need to, but their brain is needing, not able to kind of keep them alert. So this is just a kind of a look at what we do. So this over here, this little girl with the cap on, that's the cap that we use. It's the thing that you see our volunteer getting put on his head right now. This is our EEG cap that we will use to conduct the brain mapping, but then also for neurofeedback, this is the cap that our clients wear on a regular basis. What you see in the middle up on top there is a client who is doing neurofeedback. So you can see the client is sitting in a chair watching his brain play a video game, and we'll show that to you in real life here at the end of our presentation. top right is a combination of some transcranial alternating current stimulation, and the big coils you see on her head are magnetic stimulation. So she's getting a treatment, a combination treatment there. The image you see on the left down there with the woman who has the helmet on, and you can see the nasal laser that's in her nose, and you can't see it because her hair is covering up, but there are also infrared lasers in her ears, and then she's wearing goggles that are part of audiovisual entrainment. She is getting like the full spa treatment at home. And this is not unusual. We kind of get to hit the cortex and the subcortex at the same time with photobiomodulation, infrared light. And that can really help to address the inflammation that Guy was talking about just a little bit ago. Middle picture on the bottom is a young lady who is relaxed with her teddy bear, having a treatment of transcranial alternating stimulation happening, as well as that pulse magnetic stimulation. And so we're literally stimulating her brain with a small amount of electrical stimulation at a particular frequency in a particular part of the brain, depending on what we've seen in the QEEG. And then the last over here on the right is heart rate variability, and that we do that most often. So what we've been talking about with the neurofeedback, the neurostimulation, photobiomodulation is really about kind of addressing the central nervous system. Heart rate variability practice can address the autonomic nervous system, which oftentimes gets extremely dysregulated when somebody has a concussion or TBI. And so we oftentimes in clinic will be doing, in one session, doing a combination of these, and then have them doing stuff at home as well. I'm going to show you this video.
Okay, the 60 nanometer light inside there, you can see it. And we have 10 nanometer light as well. You can barely see it, but it's there. Let's see. There's a little bit of purplish look inside there with the LEDs. So we've been using with different concussions.
And what happened?
I got a really bad concussion, so I couldn't really do anything.
When did this happen?
So that's just a really great testimonial of the use of infrared light to treat symptoms of from concussion. And so this little guy talking about that kind of just having a regular headache, which is common. Anybody who's had a concussion of any significance knows that that is one of the primary symptoms that is oftentimes experienced. And he's talking with you very clearly. I love how clearly he's able to talk about how that photobiomodulation really helped to decrease those symptoms of depression or of concussion.
Is it not working? We just need to do.
So they showed you their version of a helmet with that is infrared light. This is a version of what we might use. This is not a helmet like the one we see in the back, but we call this Ollie the octopus. We've named Ollie because Ollie is a good friend. And so this is just an example of the kind of device that you can use that can really get that red light to all of those different areas of the brain at one time. So I'm going to talk with you for a little bit about a case study of a young girl that we treated in the clinic who came in with a concussion, and then Guy's going to share about somebody who's a little bit older as a case study. So when our 13-year-old came in, she was an avid hockey player and a very, very social young lady. And so when she first started working with us, she had a couple of pretty significant hits to the head. And then you can see that the kind of ratings up here, I think, are the significant piece here. That first hit that she had in 2021, she rated it as a 5, so a 5 out of 10 in terms of severity. And then took another hit in January, like a month later, right? That was rated at a 7. And then, later on that year, took a hit when she was playing flag football, and she rated that one at 9. And that's when she came into our clinic, as after that had happened. Prior to coming in to see us, she had done kind of the standard concussion therapy, the vision therapy, all those sorts of things. She was also in doing chiropractic care, which was a plus. Her parents were really good about kind of looking at providing as much kind of integrative care as possible. And she was getting some body work done as well. She was continuing to have some pretty significant symptoms. So she was reporting severe fatigue. This one young lady was sleeping on average 16 hours a day. So when it came time to get up in the morning to go to school, she simply would not wake up. And this was not because she didn't want to, because remember, she is a really social kid and school was, her favorite place to be. But she could not, her brain just was so dysregulated that she was not able to really get the energy to get up in the morning. And so she had been missing a lot of school, and that was becoming problematic. She had daily headaches, which was the sleep and the daily headaches were her primary complaints. She had some others that her mom and dad listed, but for her, the headache pain was pretty significant. Some attention difficulties showing up, lack of motivation. Like I said, couldn't attend school because of the pain and fatigue. Couldn't spend time with her friends, which was really starting to lead to some depressed mood for her because she was spending most of her day sleeping and then not able to play sports. And that, again, was a pretty troublesome symptom for her or presentation for her. So when we did the QEEG on her, we found quite a few biomarkers that are kind of consistent with QEEG. So I'm just going to share them with you. So up on the top here, that biomarker is something called a delayed P300. And so what it really has to do with when we see it delayed in the way that we do, I'm going to see, that won't work on there, will it? What we would like to see is I don't know that you can see it where you're at, but these are milliseconds that we're seeing up at the top there. And at 300, we'd like to see this big burst of activity. But instead, what you notice is there's a little bit around 300, a little bit early, but there's a whole bunch happening at 400, 500, 600, 800 milliseconds after a presentation of a stimuli. So in an optimally functioning brain, when a stimulus is presented at 300 milliseconds, the brain kind of grabs onto it, locks onto it. What we see with our case study here is her brain was not doing that very well. It was quite delayed. And so that's an indication of cognitive fatigue and some resource allocation difficulties, right? Remember the sleeping that she was having? No surprise based on what we see with that. And then down on the left with those yellow head maps that you see, this biomarker is excess delta and theta. So those are slow brainwave frequencies, and they're a common biomarker in concussion. When you see those show up, oftentimes what comes along with that in terms of the symptoms or what a client might report is cognitive slowing. So things like attention, focus, ability to be able to kind of process information all get slowed down, and so can start to kind of feel sort of dulled. Our client was reporting that lots of difficulty trying to attend when she would be in school, trying to pay attention to what was in front of her and sort of focus on it had become really challenging for her. And then the biomarker on the right is a deficiency in fast waves, so beta wave here. And so that deficiency is also, so beta waves are kind of like, I always think of them as our thinking waves, like they're fast brain waves that allow for cognitive processing to go smoothly and all of that sort of thing. So when it's deficient, that also is going to impair cognitive processing. And so you can see, just looking at these three biomarkers, that her brain is really compromised, and helps us to start understanding why she was struggling the way she was. And then she had a couple more show up. The one on the left is, we look at that analysis, it's an analysis of microstates. Microstates are kind of like transient bits of electrical activity that might happen within a brain network. I always think of it kind of like, Like if you imagine a piece of music, and an orchestra playing like a piece of music. So something like maybe Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or something like that. And so there's the different segments of the orchestra, the winds, the brass, the violins, the cellos, the percussion, each of them kind of playing their own thing. Those are kind of like brain networks. Each one of those is like a brain network. What a microstate is like a motif in the piece of music. So if you think about Beethoven's Fifth, right? That's the da 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 da. Right? That motif is microstate, right? And in those moments when they show up, they're kind of like a reflection of sort of which network is in charge in the moment. So if we find that somebody is spending either too much or too little time in one of those microstates, that can suggest some dysfunction in those areas. And so this young lady she's right on the edge of too little time in microstate B, which is connected to like visual processing and also the dorsal attention network, which is our top-down attention network. So kind of what the brain focuses on. And so this is kind of supporting some of what else we saw in terms of some of those cognitive processing issues. And then the one on the right, she had a low peak alpha frequency. Hers is, so typically at her age, maybe somewhere around 9 would be kind of optimal. In an adult, it would be 10 hertz. Hers is hovering around at 7 hertz, was a pretty significant deficiency there. And again, the peak alpha frequency is sort of like your brain's processor. So very similar to like a computer processor that helps the computer to run quickly and smoothly. That's what peak alpha frequency is in a human brain. So when it is slow, that is a slow processor happening. And so it's going to slow down cognitive processing, again, kind of the processing of information from sort of the subcortical areas to the cortical areas, back and forth, that sort of thing. And efficiency can be compromised in that regard. So she had plenty of reasons for her to be experiencing all of the symptoms that she was having. The good news about all of this was that we can do stuff about all that we saw in here. And so we got about doing it, right? So we started her out with doing some neurostimulation. We did transcranial alternating current, really addressing that peak alpha, the slow peak alpha. We really wanted to target that, get her brain's processor working better, a little bit more energy going, that sort of thing. She responded actually really well to the neurostimulation and started to report that it was also helping. It started to help her with sleep, but also started to report fairly early on some reduction in pain, her experience of intensity of pain. And then we had done, I think maybe 6, 7, 8 neurostimulation sessions. And then we moved over to 19-channel neurofeedback so we could hit some of those networks that had shown up as dysregulated. And she did have some that were showing. The most dysregulated network of hers was her reward network. Low motivation, fatigue, loss of pleasure that comes from blunting, sometimes a depletion in dopamine when that network is disrupted. And so it can help, that could help us to understand some of her symptoms as well. And so we started working with her on that. All the while, we also had her doing audiovisual entrainment at home, had her using the peak alpha or working on enhancing the alpha at home. But we also had her doing some SMR, kind of low beta training for a while. And then at some point she said she wanted to go back to doing neurostimulation and couldn't really say why, but kind of did. At first I thought it's because it's hard to do neurofeedback and she just didn't want to do the work of it. But the reality was that she intuitively understood that it seemed to be helping her pain more than we had realized. And so I said, okay, let's go back and try it. And we did that. And her symptoms improved pretty significantly. So to date, what she will tell you, what her parents tell us is she is experiencing more energy. She is now back at school. We had to do exactly what Dr. Hlee said with school and kind of gradually move her into school, making her get up in the morning, even though she felt like she couldn't. So we'd start by having her just sit up in bed, and that was it. Maybe she wasn't going to go to school that day, but she couldn't lay flat. We had her sitting up, and we kind of gradually did that. Over time, her sleep started to get better, more regular and less 16-hour days, going back more to like 8 and 9-hour sleeping evenings or night times. She started to be able to socialize more without getting super fatigued and the headache kicking in again, which was kind of the signal for her when she was at school that she couldn't last through the whole day, because that headache would start to come back and she'd start to feel that overwhelming fatigue. And so we had this plan set up that she could go to the nurse and tell the nurse, and then she would either stay there for a while or she would go home. But eventually she got to the point where she's able to attend school regularly, and stay in school. And then we did the thing that she was dying to do, which was to do the baby steps getting back into sport, right? And so we started with her just going and helping to coach while the team was playing on the field, right? And then started gradually moving her into playing as well. And she is doing quite well at this point in time.
All right. So he's a peak performer, both peak performer athlete. So he's a triathlete, Ironman, but also a top performing CEO, big company, about to acquire another company. So a lot going on for him. Go, high intensity. Somebody at work mentioned that maybe he was a little bit off. Things had slowed down a little bit. And that was enough for him to be like, okay, there's a problem. Like if somebody's noticed, like I've slowed down even 1%, I got to fix that. So he reached out. He wanted to see if we could help fix his brain. At that point, he really acknowledged he had no problem, but somebody had mentioned something and that was enough, right? So I love that kind of attitude. So we start doing our intake, doing the QEEG, what we're about to see here, put a cap on, have somebody sit there. And what I found out was that he couldn't go 30 seconds without falling asleep. So just immediately that there wasn't stimulation, he'd fall asleep. So we started talking about that. He said, oh yeah, my friends joke about it all the time. If there's a lull in the conversation, I'll fall asleep. And I was like, that's not normal. But he just thought it was just a quirk of his nature, and so be it. Now, in the intake, we do find out that he did indeed have a head injury, kind of slipped out of the saddle on a horse. And so he's dangling upside down on a horse and hits his head on a rock and unconscious, gets dragged for a while, eventually wakes up, still connected to the horse, gets back on, rides back, and he's like, I'm fine, right? He went to see a chiropractor once for one treatment, and then he thought he was all better, and so he was good to go. So, and I'll add to that, what I didn't know until much after I had treated him was that he had a previous brain injury, driving a car, not paying attention, drove into the back end of a front end loader, right? So that thing did not move. He hit it about 30 miles an hour. The back end of his car came up. It pushed him up into the ceiling of the car, where he hit roughly the same spot that he had hit when he got dragged by the horse. So turns out 2 significant blows to the same area. It did help explain a little bit of what comes next. So our biggest thing to work with is the fact that he can't seem to stay awake, but otherwise, clearly he can demonstrate in his life that he can function. He performs very, very, very well at a high level. So, let's see. So we get into the sleep. So in our conversation is like, well, what can we do? What can we do for you? Like his big thing was like, can you make me better? Can you make me better at my job? Can you improve? How will I know if I'm improving? And so, again, I didn't really see that there was a deficit there, but what I could see is this falling asleep thing. So I asked him, it's like, how often do you go for a long walk with your wife and have a conversation about your life? How often do you sit and read to your children? And I knew the answer was going to be never, because he falls asleep. Tries to have a conversation with his wife, falls asleep. Try and play with the kids, falls asleep. So that part of his life just didn't happen. For him to stay awake and engaged, he needed it to be a high intensity activity. And so in those areas, he performed perfectly well. It was the whole rest of his life that he actually couldn't function in. So my conversation with him was a lot about inviting him to consider what life might be like if that part of his life was available for him. Here, so some imaging studies. You can see the red area. So we have excess delta, as Fran had talked about. One of the things that'll come up from a brain injury is excess delta. So up in this map up here, you can see, so we call this in EEG a focal slow. So a small area of a very intense slow wave. Usually an X marks the spot for a concussion. And it turns out that that also is the spot where he had hit the rock and the spot when he had the one treatment that the chiropractor had touched, and it was incredibly painful. And he decided that he didn't want anybody to touch it anymore. So that was the end of treatment in that way. So this is one of those cases where I feel like the story of what happened, how the person presented symptomatically, and what we saw in our findings could not have lined up better. Like, it was just all fit together seamlessly. And it is one of the things that really makes me appreciate the accuracy of neuroimaging and what it can tell us. So we pretty much always will run on adults a traumatic brain injury index, where it takes like a template of known brain injuries or known injured brains that have been scanned. And then it puts that template over top of the EEG and looks for where does it line up. And the more it lines up, so in this one, we have a 97% in terms of how much it lines up. So that this is a pretty strong indication. We know from his history, but it's not unusual to see this kind of a finding and a person say, as far as I know, I've never had a concussion, I've never had a brain injury, and yet we can see with a high likelihood that that's not the case. But in his case, again, it all lined up. So here again, Fran talked about the peak alpha frequency. So what we see here, again, is that focal slow. So the gray area is neurotypical. So he's got a lot of neurotypical, but right on that point of the concussion, he's got a dramatic slowing. So here we look at what's called power coupling. So we're getting really deep into the weeds in terms of neuroimaging and the math that we do to see what's going on. The kind of bluey green areas are areas of hypoconductivity. So where we would expect the brain to be talking to itself, it's not. So we have gaps in communication. So we have a little bit of hyperconductivity. That's the areas towards the center where it's deep red. Hyperconnectivity is not that unusual. Hypo is quite unusual. So when we see this much, it really stands out as a significant finding. And then here, so this again, deep in the weeds, we've got independent component analysis, imaging. We've got Loretta imaging that lets us see kind of three-dimensionally in the brain what's called source density localization. So that red line that looks a little bit like moguls on a ski hill, it should just have one peak at 10 hertz, and the rest should just drop off. That would be a normal 1/f slope. But you could see here, we've got a pretty dramatic reduction in the little bump at 10, but a way too big of a rise out in the high beta. So this is going to present as a kind of anxiety profile, right? So alpha being kind of the resting attention at ease brainwave, and beta being the active doing something. So this person is sitting doing nothing. We should see a lot of alpha and not much beta, and this is the opposite. So we've got an overactive brain. So we started off with neurostim, as we do with most of our folks. So we did some neurostim, specifically focusing on the focal slow and doing some of our protocols that are about addressing neural inflammation, about trying to help heal some of the physical brain matter itself, as well as working with the frequencies. We paired that with doing some biofeedback, because again, what showed up in his autonomic nervous system was just how dysregulated his autonomic nervous system was. So we're going to watch a video here in a moment, and so I'll show you some of those metrics rather than trying to talk you through them kind of in the abstract. There it is. Okay, so we're going to dig into the video here. So first, what you're going to see is a bit of, this is the heart rate variability, biofeedback information from an elite athlete that was about his age. So keep in mind, he's an elite athlete, triathlete, Ironman. He's an elite athlete. But this is what you should see when you do biofeedback on an elite athlete. What you're seeing here is breathing and heart rate are following each other. HRV is quite high. So for normal people, we'd be down here at 10. He's up between 30 and 40. Again, peak performance athlete. Temperature, kind of normal. Peripheral circulation, normal. Here, spectral analysis. We've got a nice peak because he's kind of breathing slow. So we've got a nice peak, which means how the heart is beating is very coordinated. So the actual beating of the heart is coordinated. So now we go into his first session. And one of the things you'll notice is his HRV below 5. That's terrible. So 3 is considered congestive heart failure, like in our scale, what we use in the clinic. Right? Significant dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system. If we look over here, his temperature, he's sitting in a room temperature room, but he's down at 73 degrees. So thermal regulation, not working for him. Peripheral circulation, down around 10. Terrible. Here, that's not really showing us the whole story right now. It's a little too small to be able to see. If we follow what's happening here, we'll see that the green line and the red line are not lining up. Right? In the elite athlete, they were in sync with one another. Here, they're not in sync. So that's what we found was one of his main dysregulations was his autonomic nervous system. That was a good amount of why he fell asleep any time there was a lull in the conversation, was his autonomics were just terribly dysregulated. So we spent a bulk of our time really focusing on rehabilitating his autonomic nervous system. And you can see already a couple sessions in, we're getting a rise in his heart rate variability. We're getting back now up to kind of a normal temperature, what we would expect for somebody sitting in a room temperature room. Peripheral circulation is on its way up. We're starting to get a little bit of what we call a following effect. So the red and the green line, the rise and fall are getting closer. So his autonomic nervous system is moving into regulation. So along with doing the neurostim, doing some neurofeedback, but we concentrated more on training his biofeedback rather than neurofeedback. We got him to a point where he could stay awake for a whole session. In the start of the biofeedback, I'd have to wake him up, like literally have to, kind of do something in the room, talk to him, shake the chair, make a noise, something to keep him awake. By the end, he could train for 45 minutes and pay attention for the whole thing, be conversational. So the biggest change that happened for him was more of what I kind of indicated in the beginning, was his ability to sit and have a conversation, right? That side of his life came back to him that had been missing for a decade or more. Right? So did he get the peak performance in terms of work? Not so much, but again, he wasn't really missing anything. But what he got back was a whole area of his life that he hadn't been able to be involved in. I think probably what I'm happiest for him is his ability to interact with his children, right, which he really had not had. Okay, so we're going to switch gears and do a kind of a live demo. So this will take us a little bit of time to get things set up. So I'm going to stop presenting here so Adam can join us. I feel like that's as good as we can get it. Adam, have we been able to make that any bigger in the past? Yeah. I feel like. So what we're looking at here is 19 channels of EEG. So all the little white dots on the cap, that's an individual sensor. And then we're seeing that come through. And then over on the side here, we have head maps. So what's happening kind of real time is the data coming in is being compared to an age and gender matched normative database of peak performance brains. So what we have over here, again, are kind of West Point grads, people that have shown they've done well in the world. So we have a normative database, and then this brain is being compared, and then this tells us what are we seeing in terms of differences between how information is moving around in your brain compared to how it's anticipated in the database. And that's a large amount of the type of training you're going to see is that. It's a comparative between a normative database and your brain as you're here. So Adam, do you want to go ahead and bring in the game? So it'd be comfortable for you to kind of lean back against the chair and just kind of, yep, that'll take a little bit of strain out of your neck. We should drop a little bit of artifact out. Yep. And then, so from a training standpoint, what you're going to do is you're just going to kind of keep your eyes on this hoop right there, that big green hoop. So you're just going to keep your eyes generally focused on that. And then what happens is the more his brain moves information around equal to the normative database, the plane flies straight. When his brain does something that the database doesn't expect it to do, the plane wobbles. So basically what's happening is when the plane is flying straight, his brain is getting a yes, right? So it's yes, yes, yes. And when the plane wobbles, the brain is getting a no. So the brain can start to pair how is it moving information in the moment, and is it getting a positive feedback or a negative feedback? If it's getting a positive feedback, it asks the question of how can I do more of that? If it gets negative, it will check and say, okay, well, what was I doing? And then it'll try a whole bunch of different things until it gets a positive. The nice thing about the brain is it can do, 14 billion calculations a second. So for the brain, figuring this out, not hard. For the mind, impossible. Most people, when they're doing neurofeedback, are trying to figure this out with their mind. They're trying to figure out how to make the plane fly straight. Will never happen. But the brain absolutely will figure it out. Within minutes, the brain is starting to figure out how to make this work. And this is how we kind of repattern the neural pathways in the brain. And so over here, what we'll see is, so if we had your QEEG data, so we had your brain metrics, what we'd be seeing here is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 different brain metrics that are potential to be trained. And then there's a really faint red line right there. So we call that the training line. So any of these metrics that are significantly dysregulated will come up and they'll cross that line. That's what makes the plane wobble. So when a brain area does something that is like significantly out of line, so 3, 4, 5 standard deviations away from neurotypical, that'll make the plane wobble. So then what we can do on our side is not only can we see the raw EEG and what's happening, and are the brain waves the way they should be, we can see the readout from the normative database, but also Adam can see specifically what area in the brain is acting up. And then as that's being trained, is it responding? Is that area of the brain learning the way we would anticipate it to learn? If yes, everything continues. If no, Adam is asking himself, how can I change the training to get this brain to change in the way we want it to change? So again, part of what we're doing is we have so much data coming through when we do neurofeedback that we can see second by second, minute to minute, session to session, week to week, month to month. How is this brain changing? Is it changing the way we would expect it to? If yes, stay the course. If no, what do we need to change? Tweak the training, ask that question again. So one of the reasons the success rate for neurofeedback is it's rare in any treatment modality that you get real-time information, right? Your doctor doesn't get real-time information when you take a pharmaceutical on how that's being metabolized, and is it going where it's supposed to go, and is it making the change that it's supposed to make, right? You have to wait for months and months and months to see, does your physiology change? What we get to do is watch the process, and if it isn't happening the way we think it should, we get to change the process and see how that goes. Anything else? Oh, Heidi? Oh, thank you. Okay. Anything else about this that is worth mentioning?
I think so.
No? No. How's your sense of just playing the game? What's sure? Yeah, yeah. You seem pretty at ease about it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Which is great. It's not always the case. There can be a lot of frustration, and
No, I mean, I've had,
maybe it can be changed. Yeah,
I mean, maybe, but it's not like I can.
sure. Yep. Yeah. So no, what we often see when people do their first is they're in the chair and they're like leaning their head, trying to make the plane go, and you can see their tongue in their mouth. It's like they're just trying to, just in there. But I was appreciating the fact that you're just completely at ease and you were just watching, and I could see your brain changing. I could see it. So that's great.
Well, no, I got frustrated when it didn't take off. But
Yeah. Any questions? Anybody? Any questions about any of it for Dr. Hlee, for Fran, for myself, about what you're seeing here? Okay. Well, fantastic. I think we will call it there. And so again, I want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Dr. Hlee, for making time to come and talk with